What's on your radar, Kim?
Well, Joe Rogan is questioning whether or not the white nationalist group Patriot Front is real or another FBI operation.
Uniformed white nationalist group marches on Lincoln Memorial. CNN's all in. They're like, we're all in on this. Come on, show us. Look at these guys. Look at these guys. Where's the fat people? How come they're all wearing the same clothes? Do that again. What the is this? Have you ever seen anything that looks more like Feds? Tell me that doesn't look like Feds. Right?
It's like the 101st Airborne.
Bro, look at this. These guys are all runners. These guys look like they just got out of buds.
I mean, look,
out of here.
They could be real.
Right. They could be real.
They could be real.
Listen, Matt Taibbi, I'm an unreliable source, and I'm a comedian. But looking at that, I'm calling bull. Give me that again. Give me that again.
Yeah, okay.
Well, this gets back to like the Oklahoma ivermectin story where
they're all wearing winter coats.
Yeah, like you know.
Look at this. The out of here. How do they all have like uniformed outfits on? They have the same color pants for the most part. Very little variation. They have tan or brown pants, dark blue shirts with a stupid flag on it. This got a drum. Back that up. Look at the drum. Are you Paul Revere? What the are you doing with that drum? He's walking around with a band drum,
it's
like
white
a high
power
school
drum
band.
line.
This is so stupid. It hurts my feelings.
Well, the march Rogan is referring to happened this past Saturday, December 4th in Washington, D.C. There were about 100 to 200 demonstrators. They all wore matching jackets, khaki pants, carried flags or shields, and seemed fairly organized, marching to the beat of a snare drum. Because they were so seemingly organized, others besides Rogan wondered the same thing. Comedian and author Tim Young wondered, was today's Patriot Front parade just the FBI spending their end-of-year use-it-or-lose-it budget? Host Mr. Reagan tweeted, so the feds have a new fake militia group called Patriot Front. This is a laughably poor attempt at trying to trick conservatives into committing acts of terrorism. But it's also incredibly disturbing that they're doing this at all. So this made me curious. I'd never heard of this group, and I wanted to dig deeper. Who are they, and what are they about? Could it be that Joe Rogan's suspicions are right, and this is an FBI operation? Or is this group very real and a genuine growing threat? Or is this group real and not really a growing threat, but one that can easily be ignored instead? Well, it turns out the group began in 2017 after the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally that resulted in the murder of Heather Heyer. That rally was organized by a group called Vanguard America. But apparently, after the chaos and violence, there was some infighting between the main leader of the group and one of his underlings. Ultimately, the underling, Thomas Rousseau, who was 18 at the time, decided to leave Vanguard America because of the violence and start his own group that he called Patriot Front. So the group is decidedly nonviolent, but they do believe that the country should be run exclusively by people of European ancestry. They do think people from different places and backgrounds can live in America, and they state they believe they can even be good citizens, but they should not be considered Americans nor make decisions for the country. They spend a lot of time talking about the corruption of our government and how bought off they are by corporations. They are very anti-drug. None of their members can use substances. They say the Americas were conquered by the colonizers, not stolen, and seem to be very proud of this. They say they believe in revolution and resisting tyranny, but I haven't seen any photos of any of them with any firearms or weapons. In fact, the worst thing this group seems to do is hang posters advertising themselves and tagging buildings with their slogans. That what stands out about this group and where one could come to the conclusion that this really is an FBI operation is how polished and organized they are. First of all, their website is extremely professional with well-done graphics, professional photos, and even a cinematic video trailer. It's almost too professional. Their social media posts are uniform and look like they're managed by a social media expert. Everything is color coordinated and themed. Even their graffiti is done with stencils. Their manifesto sounds like it's read by a professional voice actor. Nothing is sloppy. Snooping around their social media posts, you'll see videos and photos of the members who are relatively young looking, participating in boot camp style athletic drills and doing boxing workouts. They go on hikes and excursions, and they always wear matching uniforms and white face coverings. They've held several marches around the country, similar to the one held in D.C. In places such as, they've held these marches in places such as Philadelphia, Salt Lake, Nashville, and San Antonio. And when looking to sign up for the group, the form explicitly asks the members to never divulge any information that would identify themselves. They protect their identities from the organization and from each other. So I'm not going to lie, between their website, social media posts, cinematic trailer and manifesto, and their organized marches, it's really hard to believe that some 18-year-old kid did all of this. How would some kid even know how to put on boot-style camp drills and keep the group organized? It looks like the work of someone who ran military units. What makes me skeptical of this being some sort of FBI operation attempting to root out white nationalists is because it's a very nonviolent group. When posting about their marches, they always highlight that they were peaceful and conducted safely. They seek police escorts, and in one instance, when counter-protesters engaged them, they ended their march to avoid any sort of violent conflict. One would think if this group is part of some sort of FBI operation, they would be attempting to engage in violence or illegal activity of some sort. For years, the FBI has run sting operations within the Muslim community in an attempt to root out terrorists. They would infiltrate Muslim communities, and once a person is deemed a suspect, the FBI would run a sting operation and often supply everything that was needed. For example, in 2009, a group of 4 Muslim men, known as the Newburgh Four, were charged with plotting to bomb 2 Jewish synagogues and shoot missiles at military supply planes. However, it turns out there was an FBI informant among them who basically schemed the whole thing and roped these men into it for money. He suggested the plot and the targets, bought the gun, provided the fake bombs and missile, assembled the explosive devices, and drove them around. The Fort Dix 5 was another FBI planned plot to attack New Jersey Army base Fort Dix. The FBI informants plotted everything and supplied the weapons. The men who were convicted were really only guilty of being Muslim and expressing their disgust with the American wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But nonetheless, the country had an appetite to find and stop terrorists, and so overzealous law enforcement went to work. With the growing narrative of far-right white nationalists and Trump supporters being the country's greatest threat, we've seen the same FBI entrapment tactics being used. The attempted kidnapping of Governor Gretchen Whitmer is one recent example where it was discovered that at least 12 undercover informants played major roles in the scheme. The Biden administration and Democrats in general are bent on selling this threat to the American public. So it makes sense why so many would be suspicious about whether or not organizations such as Patriot Front are actually real. So I can't say whether or not they are, but I can say from looking through their sites and watching their videos that if they are supported by someone unidentified, it's likely someone with military training and definitely someone with money. So I'm curious if you guys think, kind of looking at all of this, I mean, look, these kids, they have shields like the police style riot shields, and they're painted in red, white, and blue, and they all have uniforms, they have training camps. It's just, there's clearly money behind this group. There's not very many of them. This group is small. It's only a few hundred people, maybe around the country. I'm curious if you think, looking at this, do you think this is possibly an FBI operation, or do you think this is real?
I mean, the fact they came in the U-Hauls is extremely suspicious. None of them had trucks. So basically, if you were going to be the FBI or some agency, probably FBI, and you were going to organize something like this, all of the boxes that you would check are being checked here.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that's what happened, but that's really like not carrying weapons, not engaging the protesters in any type of violence that could escalate, because those would be rules of engagement that as a law enforcement person you're not supposed to do. Showing up in a U-Haul, because if you show up in or a rented van, because if you show up in your own, then people can figure that out and trace it back. Like all of these things, plus Rogan's like it just doesn't scan type of thing.
It doesn't work.
And to say that these may be feds is not to discredit the idea that there is a problem with white supremacist militias around the country. People should not take that away from that point. The feds infiltrated and propped up all sorts of left-wing socialist and civil rights groups in the 50s and the 60s, which does not mean that there were not organic, real civil rights and socialist organizations. It just means that this is what the feds do.
Yeah, and you could say the same thing about what the feds were doing throughout the aughts when they were infiltrating mosques, et cetera, which, by the way, interestingly...
It's of course the case that there are, terrorists that exist in the world.
Yeah.
But also, it is the case that the feds gin up stuff because they're no good at their jobs.
Yeah.
So they have to fake things so that they can then trick idiots into giving them a press conference.
And that's the parallel with what we know about the Whitmer plot. Like, that is really interesting. I mean, it's very unfortunate for the FBI that that was so easy to sort of unravel. And similarly, this one is looking like when you have these glaring red flags, like U-Hauls and uniforms, et cetera, like it's making it really easy to identify. And there's a question of whether they're that dumb, open question. But I would say it's possible that, like the Whitmer plot, it's a combination of both. And that you have somebody who is putting these ideas in the ears of people like, hey, we should do U-Hauls, and there are sincerely people in this group that believe the noxious things that the group purports to believe. And then the last thing I'll add is one thing that's alarming to me is how in sync a lot of wealthy establishment people in this country with money are with the feds now. And it is entirely possible to me that they would put money behind this just on their own. If you look at NBC, MSNBC, I mean, it's full of feds, and like the Lincoln
Actual
Project types
Yeah.
love these types of people, and so I could just see that happening without the feds even needing to, at this point, actually nudge it along.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, how big of a threat are these things really, though? So yes, do these things exist? Yes, do terrorists exist in all forms? Yes, but how large of a threat? What are we, the American people, willing to give up or willing to do to others in order to root out that threat? So something like this, a group like this, they're going around the country, they're doing these marches, they're wearing these white masks that are kind of reminiscent of white hoods, right? So it kind of gives you that visual of, oh my gosh, these are, they're organized, they're marching with these flags and these shields, and they're scary, they're covered with these white masks, and it's, the optics of it is very frightening for people. To see this happening at the nation's capital or in Philadelphia or in Salt Lake City or in Nashville, all around the country, the optics of it are very, very scary. So, but look, I grew up in Idaho. I have to say we had actual white supremacist camps in Idaho. They had parades every year. They were allowed to have those parades. The ACLU fought on their behalf to have those parades. They were nonviolent. We ignored them. I never saw a single one of those parades. I never ran into a single one of them. I mean, even though those camps existed, they're no longer there. But even though that existed where I grew up, it was literally, it was just no threat to us. They could be ignored. And this is a kind of group that, if it is real and not some sort of FBI operation, I just think they're not a real threat. They're not doing anything. They've got wacky ideas that are really backwards that the vast majority of America are not going to agree with. There's no threat of this ideology growing inside of the American public. Even on the right, they're not going to agree that, no, America should just be European. I just don't think they're a threat at all. It's just not a real threat.
I do think the ideology is a real thing, but I do think this particular group was fabricated. But we'll see.
So you're believing that you think it's fake.
Those particular clowns, I kind of do. Yeah.
It's very, very
but I don't
polished.
know. It might not be. I don't know. But it just doesn't smells off. Yeah.
Rogan and Taibbi, great combination though. That was fun.
I haven't listened to it yet.
That was fun.
Anyway, we will have more Rising right after this.